Welcome back to the C-Suite. I'm Danielle Jaworski. In this segment, we are talking with Jen Hutton. She is the CEO of the Women's Crisis Services Waterloo region. And we're really going to be talking about and sharing and bringing more awareness to the domestic abuse that does happen in Waterloo region and what we can all do to play our part in ending domestic violence. So welcome, Jen, to the show.
Thanks for having me.
This is a really important topic because domestic violence, it is definitely in Waterloo region, but it's something that it isn't necessarily talked about. And really there needs to be an awareness around it because at the end of the day, there is something that we can all do to help end domestic violence. Can you share a little bit more about what we can do as viewers and a little bit more about the services that are available to women and children?
Yeah, absolutely. We often say that everyone has a role to play in ending domestic violence, which has become a tagline in our She Is Your Neighbor series. For far too long, domestic violence has existed in a lot of silence and a lot of shame. And we're really wanting to bring it out into the light and get people talking about it and just recognizing how prevalent it really is.
The She Is Your Neighbor project, that's a really interesting initiative that you started, looks like last year as a blog, and it's really grown into something so much more.
Yeah, absolutely. We started with a blog series in year one, and then the past 2 years, we've done a podcast series, and it's gone over really, really well. I think we reached 5,000 listens last month, so that was really cool. We had to celebrate that. So a lot of people are interested in learning more. And we have some really unique stories and some really interesting people on the podcast, lots of local leaders and even beyond. We've had Moose Hide campaign, and they're actually out of BC. And we've had reporters out of Toronto. And so some really unique guests that cover a real variety of topics.
Mm-hmm. And what are the greatest needs that you're seeing right now, kind of identified through the She Is Your Neighbor project?
Yeah, well, we're really tackling a bunch of different issues, and I think it really demonstrates just how complex domestic violence is as a social problem. There's so many root causes that we look at and try to work to address. It's just super complex, and there's a lot of things that we want to educate our community on so that they have a growing awareness.
Mm-hmm. And where are you seeing a lot of support coming from those in the community who are now becoming more aware about the domestic violence in the community and what role they can play in ending it?
Yeah, I think we've reached, because we've had so many different stories shared through the podcast. I think it tends to be one story might resonate with one person and not somebody else. But it's really increased the different groups that we're connecting with and that are coming back to see how they can support us. We've had donations in honor of She Is Your Neighbor. We've had highlighted people working in the tech sector. So that's reached out to a variety of different people through that avenue.
Mm-hmm. And what are you finding are some common, maybe not myths, but some common areas of awareness that people just don't seem to have around domestic violence? Because like you said, like maybe it was something that was almost kept hidden and not necessarily talked about.
Yeah, I think sometimes people, once they learn a little bit more, they might become aware of somebody they may know or somebody they may have worried about. I think sometimes when people think about domestic violence, they think about physical abuse, but we know it's so much more than that. There's financial abuse, emotional abuse. And when we talk about things like red flags, people may say, hey, you know what? I think one of my sister's relationships or one of my friends' relationships had some real significant red flags.
Mm-hmm. I think you hit on a key point there is the fact that when we think domestic violence, you think like the physical violence piece, but there's so many other kind of like areas of violence that are there that if you don't know the signs, you wouldn't even know that something could be amiss.
Yeah, exactly. One thing that we do know is that about 80% of women reach out to a friend or family member to share their experience. So a new program that we recently started at Women's Crisis Services is called Neighbors and Loved Ones. So it's kind of a play on the She Is Your Neighbor series, but it's a support for friends and family, and giving them some support and tips to help their loved ones so that they know what to do, because they often don't know what to do or how to help.
Mhm. And if someone is becoming aware that potentially there might be a domestic violence situation for with a friend, a peer, a family member, what is something that they can do to support?
Well, they can do a variety of different things. I always say that the most important thing is to be a listening ear, to let them know that you're there for them and that you're not going to judge. And I often say to people, it's really important to plant a seed, and it's their journey, and what they do with it is totally up to them, but that will stay with them. Those comments that you might be worried about them or you're here to help will stick with them, and they'll come back around to you when they're ready.
Mhm. So you're talking about support. So as a community, how can we better support and help support the initiatives of the She Is Your Neighbor project?
Yeah, well, we want people to tune in and to listen. And we do a lot of promotion of the podcast online through social media. So sharing that, following us on social media, that all helps. We're looking to kind of like a play off a book club. We're looking at doing a podcast club for the community. So I think that will be really interesting for folks to join in on.
Nice. And you have an outdoor activity coming
Yeah.
up very shortly in the month of November. Can you talk more about the walk that is happening?
Absolutely. Well, November is actually Women Abuse Prevention Month, so it's a big month for us. So we're doing a lot of activities to raise awareness, and one of the biggest activities that we have on the go is on November 20th, where we're doing a walk, and it's called Voices Empowered: Walk to Break the Silence. And again, really getting talking and raising awareness of the issue, and we're walking 6 kilometers. And the reason that we're walking 6 kilometers is because sadly, a woman is killed every 6 days by an intimate partner, and that's in Canada. So unfortunately, those stats have increased. So we really want to focus on that so that people are aware of the extent of the problem and just unfortunately how severe it can be.
Mhm. Well, thank you so much, Jen, for being here today and talking about the Women's Crisis Services of Waterloo Region and also how the community, how we can all help to get involved to end domestic violence. So thank you for being here today.
Well, thank you for having me.